Every empire believes it has reinvented money, and every empire learns, sooner or later, that it hasn't, because money obeys laws older than any kingdom or constitution, silent, relentless rules that care nothing for power, pride, or optimism. These laws were not written by scholars. They were carved through centuries of collapse, rediscovered by each generation that thought it was smarter than the last. Ignore them and you end up asking the same question people have asked for thousands of years. Why does the system always feel rigged? So tonight, let's uncover those buried laws of money, the patterns that haunted Rome, Paris, and New York alike. They explain why fortunes vanish, why debts never die, and why the game, from the very start, was never fair. Let's begin with the most brutal of them all, Gresham's Law. In the 1500s, a merchant named Thomas Gresham explained it to Queen Elizabeth I in words that would echo through every era since. Bad money drives out good. The rule is deceptively simple. If two kinds of currency circulate side by side, one trusted, one corrupted, people will spend the bad and hoard the good. Take ancient Rome. When the silver denarius was gradually mixed with cheaper metals, citizens weren't fools. They used the diluted coins for taxes and trade, and they buried the pure ones in the ground. Medieval kings repeated the same trick, trimming edges from coins, replacing gold with copper. And the people adapted again. They always do. They spend the fake and save the real. And once that habit spreads, faith in money begins to rot from within. But there's a darker mirror to this principle, a reversal that strikes when trust itself collapses. Thiers' Law. Named after Adolphe Thiers of 19th century France, it reveals what happens when bad money finally dies. In times of extreme crisis, the logic flips. Good money drives out bad. Picture Weimar Germany in the 1920s. A loaf of bread doubled in price every few days. Wheelbarrows full of paper bills rolled through the streets. People refused to hold marks even for a minute. They escaped into gold, dollars, cigarettes, or barter. Anything that still held value in a world where paper meant nothing. The same pattern appeared in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, in every hyperinflation that turned wages to dust. Gresham's Law describes the slow decay of confidence. Thiers' Law marks the instant when it dies altogether. Between those two lies a gray zone, the living heart of unfairness itself. That's where the Cantillon effect rules. Richard Cantillon, an Irish-French thinker from the early 18th century, noticed a cruel pattern. When new money enters the system, it never reaches everyone equally. The first to touch it, governments, banks, and those nearest to power, enjoy its strength. They spend the fresh money before prices rise. By the time it trickles down to workers and savers, the market has already shifted. The early receivers buy assets and land at yesterday's prices. The late ones pay tomorrow's. It's the invisible hand that tilts the table. You see it in every modern stimulus and bailout. When central banks flood markets with liquidity, Wall Street soars while paychecks stagnate. When governments print relief checks, they dissolve in higher grocery bills and rent. Inflation isn't just a number. It's a transfer of power, and you're not the beneficiary. The cruelty is that this process is deliberate. The system funnels gains upward and hides the cost behind rising prices. Ordinary people feel robbed, but can't name the thief. The Cantillon effect isn't new. It's the oldest trick in finance, running quietly since the first coin was struck. The powerful don't just earn more. They receive money first, under rules that guarantee everyone else falls behind. If Cantillon's Law explains how new money flows uphill, another rule explains how governments make sure you never climb out: financial repression. It began after the Second World War, when nations were drowning in debt and needed a way to pay it off without revolt or default. They found one: trap the public inside the system and let time erase the debt for you. Central banks held interest rates below inflation. That meant every year savers lost value even as their account balances stayed the same. At the same time, capital controls and taxes limited escape routes. You couldn't move your wealth abroad or protect it in gold. Citizens became captives of their own currencies, watching their savings quietly melt. It was taxation without violence, a slow bleed disguised as stability. And it worked. Governments inflated away their wartime debts while citizens never saw the knife. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the same mechanism hums beneath the surface. After the financial crash of 2008, interest rates fell near zero for over a decade. Savers lost trillions in purchasing power, while those who owned stocks and real estate grew richer than ever. Then came the pandemic stimulus, the second wave of quiet confiscation. Ordinary people watched prices leap while their savings stood still. It wasn't an accident. It was the modern face of financial repression, silent, mathematical, and brilliant in its disguise. Because unlike open taxation, this theft leaves no fingerprints. People don't march over it. They just wake up each year a little poorer, wondering why they can't seem to catch up. These laws don't just rule your wallet, but they rule empires. Because when a financial system expands far beyond its roots, it begins to obey a cruel geometry. Growth at the center demands sacrifice at the edges. That's the heart of Triffin's paradox, the reserve currency trap. In the 1960s, an economist named Robert Triffin warned the United States Congress about a flaw hidden inside the Bretton Woods system. If the dollar was to serve as the world's reserve currency, America would have to flood the globe with dollars, enough to finance trade and investment everywhere. But to supply that liquidity, it would need to run trade deficits year after year, sending its money abroad faster than it could earn it back. In the short run, that plan worked beautifully. The world trusted the dollar. Factories in Europe and Asia roared to life. Global trade blossomed under American credit. But every success carried its own decay. The more dollars the United States exported, the weaker its link to gold became. The more it promised, the less it could deliver. Confidence in the system began to thin like gold leaf. Triffin's warning came true a decade later. In 1971, President Richard Nixon severed the dollar from gold entirely. The age of pure fiat had begun. From that moment, the United States could print the world's reserve currency without restraint. And it did. Factories moved overseas, debt ballooned, and the dollar's dominance replaced production as the engine of American power. The paradox is merciless. To remain the world's banker, a nation must bankrupt its own strength. To supply money for others, it must hollow itself out. Every empire that held the world's reserve, from Spain's silver to Britain's pound, faced the same destiny. The crown that rules global finance is also a crown of thorns. And as the 21st century unfolds, the cracks widen. China and Russia form new blocs. The BRICS nations whisper about alternatives. Central banks quietly hoard gold again, as if preparing for a reckoning no one dares announce. The very system that once gave the United States limitless reach now carries the seeds of decline within it. That is Triffin's paradox, the curse of being trusted too much. But even when nations recognize the trap, they still fall into another, Goodhart's Law. In the 1970s, Charles Goodhart noticed something deceptively small yet devastating. When a measure becomes a target, it stops measuring truth. Governments love numbers: 2% inflation, 5% unemployment, 3% growth. They sound precise, scientific, controllable. But the moment leaders decide those numbers must be achieved at any cost, the meaning behind them dissolves. Take inflation targeting. Central banks vowed to keep prices stable, around 2% a year. To do it, they slashed interest rates, printed liquidity, and inflated asset markets. On paper, inflation looked calm. In reality, housing, healthcare, and education costs exploded far beyond the charts. The statistics said order. The streets said chaos. Or look at GDP, the holy number of politics. Once it became a symbol of success, nations began chasing growth like addicts. They borrowed, outsourced, and built bubbles just to keep the line moving upward. The result? A fantasy of prosperity built on hollow debt and vanishing industries. The map no longer matched the territory. Goodhart's Law exposes the trick. Once you start managing the score, you stop playing the game. And then comes the final law, the one that no empire escapes. The law of diminishing returns on debt. It's not philosophical, it's arithmetic. At first, borrowing feels like magic. You take on debt, and the economy surges. Each dollar of credit fuels a dollar of growth, sometimes more. But as the pile grows, something shifts. The efficiency fades. A new dollar of debt buys only 50 cents of expansion, then 25, then almost nothing at all. Growth slows, yet the debt keeps climbing. The engine still runs, but it no longer moves forward. It just overheats. That's where we are now. The United States owes more than $30 trillion. Each new round of borrowing props up the markets, but produces little real wealth. Factories don't reopen. Infrastructure doesn't rise. Debt becomes self-referential, borrowed to pay the interest on what was borrowed before. The pattern is ancient. The Romans debased their coins when conquest stopped paying for itself. The French monarchy borrowed into collapse before the Revolution of 1789. Britain's empire strained under mountains of loans after 2 world wars. And now the modern empire faces its own arithmetic fate. Because debt buys time, not salvation. It's the pause between heartbeats before the system resets. And history always resets. When you step back, all these rules form a single pattern. The anatomy of monetary illusion. Bad money circulates until it poisons trust. In crisis, people flee to anything real. New money flows upward first, leaving workers behind. Governments repress savers to erase debts they dare not admit. Reserve currencies decay from the weight of their own dominance. Metrics distort reality. And debt, in the end, devours itself. These are not theories. They're the heartbeat of every boom and every collapse. They explain why wages lag while prices climb, why your mortgage feels heavier even as markets hit record highs, why nations rise on faith and fall on arithmetic. Money isn't magic, it's gravity. It pulls every empire down to the same ground eventually. The only difference is how long the illusion lasts. And here's the final whisper of history, the truth no system dares speak aloud. The game was never meant for you to win. Ordinary people live in daylight, under transparency. Elites operate in shadow, under secrecy. You file taxes, they move assets. You hold barshvo that decays. They hold assets that multiply. You play by the rules, they write them. But once you understand these laws, once you see them, the spell breaks. Because awareness is the first form of wealth no system can confiscate. History doesn't repeat, but money always obeys. And if you don't learn its laws, it will teach them to you the hard way.